My name is Marilyn. I'm 66 years old now, and my story begins in a modest house here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a house that I helped build myself, brick by brick, after my husband died on that damn curve of I-96. Since then, everything I have done has been out of love for my only son, Christopher. But tell me something. Have you ever imagined hearing from your own son's mouth the phrase, "You're going to rot here"? Maybe you think these things only happen in the news. But what if I told you that, behind many closed curtains, there are mothers trapped inside their own homes, forgotten by those they loved the most? I know there's something inside you that wonders how this is possible. How can a son, raised with so much effort, turn his back so coldly? I'll tell you everything. No exaggeration. Wow, what a noud. Up to his tongue, sir. No flourish. Only the truth. You will understand what happened to me. And maybe, in the end, discover something about yourself too. Because sometimes, who we protect the most, he is the one who most presses the door of our captivity. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I'm not a woman to scream. Wow, I did say that is high, not enough, nor to expose my pain around. I've always been the type to keep everything until it doesn't fit anymore. And when I heard from my own son's mouth the phrase, "You're going to rot here," something inside me broke in a way that not even time could glue back. He went out to Miami with his wife, like someone who goes for a walk in a park, while I was locked in my own house, counting the grains of rice in the pantry, without a phone, without circulation, without anyone, just me, the silence, and the memory of everything I once was for him. But what Christopher didn't know, and maybe you don't know either, is that even the walls of an old house hold secrets. And one of them, forgotten in the basement, was the one that gave me the strength to turn this story inside out. If you've ever felt the pain of being left aside by those you love the most, accompany me in this memory. If this story touches your heart, leave a like, subscribe. It's not out of vanity, was only no, it's just for me to feel like I'm not telling this alone. I remember as if it were today, the day I held Christopher in my arms for the first time. It was the winter of 1989, and the snow was falling heavily in Grand Rapids. I was 30 years old, and that night I didn't sleep. I stood there, looking at that small face, feeling the weight and blessing of being a mother. My husband, my Earl, Maud. And I didn't have much, but we did have plans. He was a truck driver. He lived on the road, but every return home was a party. He had the rough manner of men raised in the countryside, but it was only necessary to touch his son, who became a boy too. When he died, in 1997, it was as if the ground had disappeared from under my feet. His truck flipped over on a frozen curve of I-96. They called me from the highway police at 3 a.m. I never slept properly after that. Christopher was only 8 years old. And there I knew that From that day on, life was going to be just me for him. I worked 30 years at Northview Public School. I was a cook. The arm hurt from carrying a box, stirring a pot, washing trays. There were days when I didn't eat, just to have a little more left over at the end of the month. But I liked to see his eyes shining when I found a note from me at lunch. He wrote in blue pen, Mommy loves you to heaven. He always kept the notes in his backpack. In the heavy winters, when the school bus got stuck, I walked him to class myself, with a blanket over his shoulders and boots I borrowed from Mrs. Joyce, my neighbor. I remember the looks of pity, but I didn't care. He was all I had, and he said that when he grew up, I'd kill boy and Touchstone. He would give me a house in Florida with a view of the sea. I managed to pay for his college with a lot of sweat. Michigan State University. Engineering. I sold my jewelry, took out a high-interest loan, cut my own health insurance. He went no Sahram, and when she called me my warrior. The neighborhood respected me, not for the simple house or the old car, but for my struggle. They have always heard that Marilyn is a woman of fiber, and I would cling to it when the bills came in and the money was barely enough. But time passes, and sometimes time changes the heart more than the appearance. When Christopher returned home after losing his job, I still believed in that boy with the backpack with the note. I thought it was just a difficult phase. I gave the room back. Prepared pancakes on Sunday. Washed his clothes with the same care as before. But his way was different. The hug was no longer coming. The look, much less. His wife, Countess Heather, arrived soon after, cold, as if I were an old piece of furniture out of place. And that's when I started to realize that a mother's love can survive anything. Less to contempt, There's something that no one tells us, that our hearts also age, not of age, but of fright. Disappointment leaves wrinkles. If you've ever felt your heart wrinkle because of someone you created with all the love in the world, comment below with I believe or I've lived it. Because sometimes all we need is to know that we are not alone in this feeling. And yet, even with the silence cutting through the house, I still had hope. He thought that maybe it was just the stress, that he needed a break, that one day he would walk through the door with a supermarket bouquet and tell me sorry. Mom, I'm lost. Now, all. But no, we know something is about to fall apart when even the noise of the clock seems to beat louder than the voice of his own son. And I didn't even know that the worst was yet to come, because the worst thing is not abandonment. That's when the door to your own house locks, and you discover that it was your own son who turned the key. And it was at that moment that something in me began to scream, silently. Have you ever felt that? I wonder what he was able to do after that. And why did he think I wouldn't have the strength to react? When Christopher returned from Philadelphia, he went with 2 suitcases in his hands and his eyes downcast. He said that they had made cuts in the company. that he needed time to reorganize. I opened the door without a second thought. I made coffee, prepared scrambled eggs the way he liked it when he was a boy. You're going to get out of this, my son. Ah, this is your home. He thanked Leo, but the hug didn't come. I thought it was fatigue. The next day, you and Dad were Tom. He brought Heather. The house had barely settled down for him, and he already needed to settle down for her too. Heather was beautiful. I can't deny that. Always with her hair up, impeccable makeup, clothes that looked like they came out of a magazine. But the look was judgmental. He entered, saying that the smell of the house was very strong, that we could make some changes. I smiled. Leon said I could open the windows, that it was just the smell of the eucalyptus oil I used in the diffuser. She did not answer. Oh, just looked around as if evaluating a place before deciding if it is worth staying. In the days that followed, Leon so calm. Everything changed. Christopher installed a camera in the hallway, another in the living room. She said it was for safety, that I was already getting too alone, and that way they could monitor me. The word sounded strange to me. Monitor? Since when is love measured by surveillance? I kept quiet. Accepted. No. After all, they were young. Modern. Lord. Maybe it was something of their generation. They started sleeping in my room, saying that it was bigger and that the bed helped with his back pain. I went to the back room, where I used to sew. I took with me a pillow and the blanket that my mother gave me before she died. It was still January, biting cold outside. But what really hurt was the coldness inside the house. One day, I went into the kitchen to prepare lunch. Heather stopped me with an icy smile. You will juice. We're going to start following a different diet. No frying, gluten-free, lactose-free, only organic food. Can it be? I said it was okay. They adapted. Deep down, no, boy. I just wanted to cook, to maintain the gesture of care. But she was already emptying my closets. My spices went to waste. The olive oil I got for Christmas was still sealed, but she said it was of dubious provenance. I was taken from my own kitchen. The sofa in the living room, where I sat to watch my evening programs, became their space. One time, I went to sit down and Heather said, "Oh, you prefer the armchair, right?" I smiled. Calm. I went back to the armchair. She knew it wasn't true, but she wanted to see me back off. And I backed off. In the laundry, my clothes started to disappear. 2 wool sweaters that my sister knitted for me disappeared. When I asked, Christopher replied impatiently, "Mom, you need to stop keeping junk." Junk? That hurt more than I could show. And then came closet day. I went into my old room to get a brown wool coat. It was my favorite, full of small pearls sewn on the sleeves. When I opened the closet door, it was empty. In place of my clothes were Heather's dresses and coats. On the floor, shoeboxes with brand new tags. I stood there, holding the doorknob with a trembling hand. I felt the world spin a little. When Christopher arrived, I asked, "Son, why? Where are my clothes?" He replied without looking up, "We put everything in the basement trunk. There is more space there." Well, I shook my head. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went down the stairs with difficulty, opened the trunk. There were my clothes, new, all folded anyway, some even dented, others smelling of humidity. I took only the brown coat and went back to the back room. That night, before going to sleep, I looked at the ceiling and thought, is this still my home? But how does a mother who raised a child alone convince herself that she is now a foreigner within the home she built? The answer, no. I still hadn't, no. But something inside me started to move. Small, audient, I dare your job will go down. Almost imperceptible, like an ember that has not yet turned into fire, but has not been extinguished either. No, because deep down, I knew what they were taking from me was not just space. It was the right to exist. That's it. It has a limit. But what happens when a woman who has always been silent? Do you begin to hear your own soul crying for help? In the beginning, they were just loose comments. The kind that we pretend we didn't hear so as not to spoil the mood. Heather passed me with that glass of wine, always in her hand, and blurted out, "Do you still use this, Marilyn?" Nothing, pointing to some object of mine. Well, as if it were accumulated garbage. Sometimes it was a shelf ornament, other times a wool blouse, one of those old ones that I kept with affection, and I would answer quietly, almost embarrassed, "Yes, I do. Has value for me." But she had already turned her face. The following week, the blouse disappeared. Then the kitchen radio. Then my wall clock that played Moon River every noon. Each thing disappeared in silence, as if it were being erased from the history of the house. I started cooking for them on Fridays. He made roast chicken, rice, and almonds, a potato salad that Christopher loved as a child. But whenever I set the table, I received a message on his cell phone. "Now, let's eat out today." And there I went, to put everything in jars, with the smell of dinner spreading in the empty house. It was as if I was insisting on a love that had already changed address. I asked Christopher one night if he had any working ideas. He replied without looking up from his cell phone, "I see some things you wouldn't understand." Neither were calm. Hurt, because I didn't want to understand things. I wanted to understand my son. But he didn't see me anymore. When I tried to start a conversation, I would leave the room, as if my every word was a weight. Heather pretended she couldn't see. No, I would stay on the couch, watching reality TV at high volume, laughing at jokes that seemed to mock the life I took too seriously. On any given Sunday, she said to me, Do you know what would look great for you, Marilyn? A smaller room. You know, easier to clean. More your face. She said this smiling, but I knew, in that second, that it was no longer my decision about where to sleep, where to eat, where to breathe. The back room became my definitive space. Christopher said nothing, neither yes nor no. He just kept fiddling with the computer, as if he were far from everything. And when my retirement statement arrived, I saw that the account card had been used to pay for a $300 grocery order. When I asked, Christopher replied, "Live out Northern in town. You'll just stay. We're keeping this house running." Mom, you also live here? But I knew that house only worked now on their side. I was just a figure who walked around the corners, who made coffee and closed doors slowly so as not to bother me. On a cold afternoon, I sat on the porch alone. I looked at the dried plants in the garden. I remembered last spring, when I was still watering each pot carefully, waiting for it to bloom. Gardening was my last ritual, and now even she was abandoned. I felt like those dried flowers. There, lilies, but invisible. I started talking to myself at night, in the dark, lying on the thin mattress in the room. She murmured the names of people who had already left. My sister, my mother, Lazing Otanshicharm, Yachao, my husband, people who, if they were alive, would have knocked on my door just because they missed me, but who stayed. It stayed to erase my footprints. And yet, even after all of that, I still thought that maybe, things could change. People who love too much always believe that the next morning will bring the apology, the hug back, the regretful look. But not every morning is light, and I still didn't know. That week, that the worst thing was not to be forgotten, it was to be eliminated. And the way they did it, she was so cruel, so calculated. Now, that to this day I ask myself, how can a son look into his mother's eyes and see only obstacles? That morning, I woke up with a heavy head and a little limp body, a dizziness that was not common. I went to the kitchen slowly, with my hands resting on the wall, trying to understand what was happening. Christopher was standing up on his phone, and I said, "No, son, I think I'm getting sick. I'm dizzy, I know, a little nauseous. How?" He looked at me as if I had said some nonsense. She dropped her cell phone on the counter and blurted out, without even disguising her tone, "You're old, Nayao, Mom, and old needs rest. Is that it?" He turned his back and went out to the backyard. No, I stood still, not knowing what to answer. I sat in the kitchen chair and stayed there for a while, listening to the silence swallow me. The next day, I woke up to the sound of a car engine. I looked out the window of the little room and saw the silver SUV coming out of the garage, the automatic gate closing slowly. Strange. I went down to the kitchen and that's when I realized something was different. The front door, it was locked from the outside. I turned the handle, forced, pushed, nothing. I ran to the back door, same thing. I went to the living room to get the landline. Disappeared. The phone that was there in the corner of the table, with a coiled wire, where I always left the contact of the pharmacy and the neighbor Joyce, disappeared. My cell phone, which I had left charging in the socket, was no longer in the charger. The base was still there, but the device disappeared. Well, at first, I thought it was a mistake, that maybe they would have run away, and they would be back soon. But when I went to the fridge, I saw the note glued with a magnet in the shape of a sunflower, the same magnet I had been using since the 90s. On the paper, little mountains. It was written by hand. We will be back in a week. Rest? It doesn't touch anything. The words seemed to scream in the silence of that kitchen. My heart raced. I ran around the house, opened windows, looked for exits, but everything had been carefully closed. I sat on the floor of the living room and felt my breathing fail. I was in prison, inside my own house. Screamed, called. I hit the walls. I tried to make noise with a pan, with the lid of a box. No one listened. No one showed up. I got up, got a glass of water, sat down again on the couch, their couch. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. As if something had died inside me. And maybe he really died, because there, at that moment, I understood that my son no longer saw me as a mother. He saw me as a burden, like a nuisance. And when a mother understands that she has become a nuisance to her own child, her soul cracks inside. The house, which once smelled of coffee and cornmeal cake, now smelled like prison. I walked through the rooms and everything seemed strange, as if the furniture had been moved during the night. My footsteps echoed differently. Each wall seemed to watch me with pity. The food in the fridge was scarce. A few eggs, a piece of cheese, a liter of expired milk. In the cupboard, there were packets of pasta, a can of corn, a box of chamomile tea. I made a mental inventory of what I could eat in 7 days. But more than hunger, it was loneliness that hurt. No, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story without frills, without makeup. If you're still listening to me so far, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's just a click, but to me, it's like you're saying, I'm here with you. But next, Marilyn, and ashamed what I did talk, and I still have a lot to tell you. On that first locked night, I didn't sleep. I walked from one side to the other, remembering every sacrifice, every birthday of Christopher's, every medicine I stopped buying to be able to pay his college tuition. I remembered the time he cried on my lap when I was a child. because a classmate said he didn't have a father. I hugged him, said that it was enough for us to have each other, that we were enough, and now I was a nuisance, an old woman who needed to rest. One. But it wasn't the ticket that hurt me the most. It was knowing that he locked the door without looking back, and the question that kept hammering in my head was only one. If he was able to leave me like this, what else would he be able to do when he returned? In the first days locked, time seemed to slip through the walls. There was no more noise of the door opening, no footsteps upstairs, no more Heather's arrogant voice complaining about the smell of the house. Only silence, a silence so thick that at times it seemed to scream. I walked slowly through the rooms like someone visiting an old tomb, and every corner of the house gave me back a memory, as if to remind me that it was still mine. After all, the first memory came when I leaned my forehead against the wall of the living room. I found myself there, 194. Was me and Earl sitting on the still raw wooden floor, eating pizza out of the box because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. He had just arrived with the keys to the house. It's simple, Marilyn, but it's ours. He said it smiling with that crooked smile that I loved. We hugged in the middle of the empty room and promised that there would be no lack of love inside. The second memory came when I opened the drawer of the cabinet, just to feel something familiar. Inside was still the card Christopher gave me for Christmas, 1999. He was 9 years old. Red paper, crooked letters, written with markers. Mommy, you are my home. I love you to space. I kept that card all my life, and now there he was, treating me like a piece of furniture out of place. The third memory took me by surprise when I walked through the front door and saw the yellowed paper still taped to the wall of the entryway. A copy of the entryway. The last mortgage bill, paid into a loan. Now 6. I remember how I cried that day. 30 years of work at school, food counted, shoes punctured, but the house was mine. Mine and my son's, or at least, that's what I thought. And the last memory hit me like a knife. It was the last time Christopher said to me, I love you. I think it was on his graduation day. In 2011, I had a special lunch, called the neighbor to take pictures, hung balloons in the backyard. When it was time to leave, he hugged me, very quickly, and whispered, I love you. Mom, Mom, thank you for everything. I never heard that from his mouth again. Reliving these 4 memories made me want to disappear. The refrigerator was almost empty. I rationed water, kept small amounts in glasses scattered around the house, afraid of the tap pressure dropping. The light was still on, but the cold of absence was colder than any winter outside. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, and wondered if that was where my story would end, if that was how God wrote the end of those who always did everything right. But it was then that, one afternoon, while the sun was coming in weakly through the crack in the curtain of the little room, I heard a sound, a muffled blim, almost like an electronic whisper coming from below. A forgotten sound, stopped. I held my breath. I heard it again. Well, down. It was a notification coming from the basement. I stood still for a few seconds. My heart beat faster. It had been so long since I heard that sound. And it was at that moment that a spark ignited. Because if there was something beeping in the basement, perhaps there was something there that Christopher forgot. And this forgetfulness, it could be just what I needed to change everything. But what was down there, waiting for me in the dark? And why did that sound seem to have come just at the moment when I most needed to hear something? I went down the stairs of the basement with my heart beating as if it were a girl's. Each step creaked. The old wood seemed to breathe along with me. Along with me. The musty smell was strong, and the air was colder than the rest of the house. The dim light from the small window at the top illuminated little, but enough for me to see that almost nothing there had been disturbed since the last time I was in that place. It was my refuge, my world of boxes with memories that no one else wanted, but that for me, they were everything. I started digging around, looking for where that sound had come from. I pushed a box with Christmas ornaments, another with old school papers. It was then that I saw, on top of a rusty chair, a brown bag of worn leather, my favorite bag, from the times when I was still working on I. Nobody touched it. It was like a time box. I picked it up carefully, opened in the zipper. I was not. I saw the dropped to see you Codilla. And there it was. There it was. An old cell phone, one of those with a small keyboard and cracked screen. When I pressed the side button, to my surprise, it lit up. The battery still had a remnant, and at that moment, I was no longer a locked lady. I was a mother with a chance. The cell phone had no signal, of course, but there were photos. Many, many. I started sliding my finger slowly across the screen. The first image was of Christopher as a 6-year-old, smiling with his front teeth missing. Then, wow, a photo of us in Riverside Park at the summer picnic of 2002. I wore that horrible straw hat, but happy. Then, short videos of him telling me, "Mom, I'll take care of you when you're big." And, okay, it was there, with my face illuminated by the screen of that forgotten cell phone, that I felt something wake up inside me. A strength that did not come from anger or sorrow, but of certainty. I'm going to get out of here. Where's how did you go down? With fire. I need to situation here. I don't know how, but I'm going to leave. Not out of revenge, but because I still existed. He was still breathing. I still had a memory, and memory is what keeps us from disappearing completely. I opened the cell phone settings. No signal. Loud. Clear. Not bound. No net ceased. I'll check out what. But he still had the Wi-Fi saved. That Wi-Fi in the house. The same since 2014. The router was there. Oh, in the corner of the basement, hidden behind a shelf. I disconnected and plugged it back in. And, like a gentle miracle, the internet is back. At the time, My finger trembled, but I knew exactly who to text. Not for Christopher. He made his choice. Oh, I wrote to Joyce, my next door neighbor. My neighbor? No. Almost 30 years of friendship. We've shared cake, bronchitis, and even burial. The message was short, harsh, the way desperation asks. They locked me up. I need help. Sent, lol, and in cell. And then I sat there on the cold floor of the basement, hugging the bag, waiting. The cell phone trembled in my hands. His old messages flashed from time to time, like gentle ghosts. And that's when I found myself saying out loud, Lou, alone in the dark? If you've made it this far in this story, stay with me a little longer. Because what comes after that, it's what changes everything. That house, which seemed to swallow me whole, was now trembling under the feet of those who tried to silence me. But did Joy see the message in time? And what would happen if Christopher came back before someone knocked on my door? I sat there on the basement floor for hours. Perhaps time seemed to have frozen along with the humid air of that forgotten space. He held the old cell phone as if it were a thread of life, even though he did not know if the message had reached anywhere. The battery flashed weak, and so did my heart. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine life outside, the trees stirring in the wind, the cars passing by on the street, the dogs barking in the distance. But inside, everything was silence and waiting until I heard it, softly, hum, almost like a breath through the concrete wall. Marilyn, it's me, Joyce Nassau. The sound of my name spoken by a familiar voice made me stand up as if my legs had forgotten about fatigue. I ran to the narrow window in the corner of the basement, my cheek against the fogged glass. Joyce! I'm here, pal. I'm here, Ronald Palm. I whispered, my voice cracking between relief and despair. She didn't scream. He did not call for help. He didn't panic. He just told me, calm down. When I hit you, Hassi Chow. I'll be right back. Minutes later, maybe hours, for those who are stuck, I heard iron banging noises, creaks, cracks, and then the side window, that little forgotten window in the basement, opened slowly. For her, Joyce pushed a grocery bag inside. Nazio, I'd stowed one annoyed out. A bottle of water. Now, a packet of loaf of bread, 2 apples, and a brand new cell phone. Still, with the activation tag, when I leaned my face against that bag, I'd cried. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since Earl's funeral. It was not only hunger, thirst, or fear. No, it was because someone had seen me. I saw myself. And when a woman is forgotten inside her own home, being seen by another woman is what saves her. I heard Joyce whisper from outside, I'm not going to leave it like this. I'm going to call the police. I know. But I raised my hand slowly and replied, firmly, no, not now, not yet. She understood. We are both of the same generation. We know that justice has its time, and that sometimes the greatest strength comes from silence. At moment, Ollie found, lying on the cold floor of the basement, with the still warm bread on my lap and the bottle of water leaning against my chest, I understood that I was no longer alone. No, no, there is something that life has taught me. Where's Obeyon, a national, the next Tuesday, otherwise trust. Women recognize women's pain, even when no one else sees. If you've also been saved by a friend, a neighbor, a random woman who reached out to you when no one else wanted to, comment below with "I know how it is" or "I understand you," because sometimes the help that lifts us up doesn't come with noise. It comes in the silence of those who really care. Joyce promised to return with more food, and he said he would be watching. With the new cell phone, what? I had a signal. I had light. And, above all, he had hope. But what I didn't know yet was that Christopher was returning ahead of schedule. And what would he find when he opened the door of the house? She would no longer be the same silent mother. Was he ready to find out who the woman he tried to erase was? The sound of the key turning on the door was like thunder after a whole week of waiting. I was sitting in the armchair, my heart racing and the new phone hidden in the sofa cover, just as Joyce taught me. The air in the house changed at once. That expensive heather perfume spread through the rooms, along with the faint sound of suitcases being dragged. They came back, laughing as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Mom, Mom," said Christopher, now entering with the same rehearsed smile as always, the smile that once made me believe in redemption. "Look what we brought you." He handed me a white blouse, one of those airport cockroaches, Nidrocom one, with the words Miami Beach printed in colorful letters. I picked up the gift and smiled, the same smile I used for years to hide what hurt. "Thank you, dear. This town, Sira. It's beautiful." Landon. Heather appeared right behind, tanned and loud, with oversized glasses and an air of superiority that filled the room. "You should have seen the sea, Marilyn. Oh, beautiful thing. Real blue." I watched her for a second. And inside, I wondered if she could imagine the kind of blue I had seen in my days locked there. The cold blue of fear. The biting blue of loneliness. "I hope you got plenty of rest," Christopher said, moving closer to the fridge. He opened the door, looked inside and made a disguised face. "It needs to go to the market. Things are ending." Oh, I almost let out a laugh. He had no idea that I survived on bread and water for a whole week. "Yes, really. Almost everything is over," I murmured. "Now, it is so nice." I sat in the armchair with my hands crossed, trying to look calm. The phone recorded every word, every movement. I had learned from Joyce. Don't react. Leo. Marilyn. Marl. Note. Maul. Let them talk. Whatever comes out of their mouths is now gold. "So, Mom," he said when he said young. opening his laptop on the table. Heather and I talked about the house. We came to the conclusion that we need to make some changes here. What kind of changes? I asked, even though I knew the answer would come like a knife. Heather straightened her hair and replied, smiling. Simple makeovers? No, no big deal. The upstairs floor has a very old floor. No. We thought about redecorating everything. Maybe painting the walls, changing the furniture. You will like it. It really will. Christopher added, no, without looking at me. But for that, we will need to remove some old things and maybe reorganize the rooms. Your little room, for example. We can think of a more appropriate space. I felt my blood cool. They were planning to erase the last trace of me from that house. Every memory, every mark on the wall, every old photo, everything would be replaced. But this time, I didn't cry. Of course, son, do what you think is best, I replied in a calm, almost sweet voice. I trust you. Heather smiled, convinced. Christopher looked relieved. They didn't realize what was behind my serenity. The phone on the couch kept recording everything. In silence, in the evening, they went upstairs to their room. What? I stood alone in the living room, staring at the Miami Beach blouse thrown on the arm of the armchair. I took the cloth and squeezed it in my hands, so hard that my fingers trembled. Wow. That piece of fabric represented more than a gift. It was the symbol of contempt, of the certainty that they could do with me whatever they wanted and still expect a smile of gratitude. But there, that morning, something changed in me. I was no longer the submissive mother who expected understanding. I was a woman who learned to wait for the right moment. I picked up the new phone, unlocked a screen, and listened to the recording again. Every word of them echoed in the phone. Clear, sharp, the perfect proof of everything they had been doing. And as Heather's voice filled the air with its honeyed tone of false kindness, I closed my eyes and thought of Joyce. She had said she would help me tidy things up. And I knew exactly what that meant. From that night on, every sentence would be kept. Every look would be a witness. My justice would not come with shouts. It would come with evidence, with strategy, with patience. I still didn't know how or when, but deep in my chest, I felt that the house was about to hear something it hadn't heard in a long time. My voice. But before that, no, fate would still reserve a blow for me. Something I could never have predicted, because sometimes, before freedom, comes the last arrest. And what Christopher did the next morning almost made me lose faith in everything that was left in me. That night, I didn't sleep. No. The sound of their laughter upstairs pierced the ceiling as if mocking what was left of me. I sat on the edge of the bed. My phone hidden inside the sewing box, listening to their footsteps, their muffled whispers, their plans they thought no one was listening to. I learned, after so much silence, that silence has ears, and mine were more attentive than ever. Around midnight, I heard the phrase that changed everything. Heather said, "No. If we can get her to sign, it's clean money." And Christopher replied, in that cold voice that no longer sounded like the boy I raised. "She signs. He always signed. She trusts." That word, clean money, pierced me like a blade. That was it. They wanted to sell the house. The same house that my husband built with calloused hands, that I kept standing even with my back aching and my heart in pieces. They wanted to transform everything I experienced into a cipher. I felt a strange calm. It was not despair. It was the kind of calm that comes when you finally understand that the pain has already done what it could do. I wasn't going to cry, nor beg. I was going to wait. And this time, they would be the ones who would hear the sound of their own silence. In the morning, how intolerable, my dad saying cell is a passion stanutria. Let's see her mind. As soon as they left to solve some things, I called Joyce. None. I used the new phone number. She answered in a second. Say, honey, are you okay? I took a deep breath and said, Joyce, I need a lawyer. She was mute for a moment. Then he replied, I see. Oh, Mr. Tom, I replied. I know someone. Sheila Brooks. She works with the community's elder protection group. Why, I'll take you to her. That was the first time anyone called me a protege. I, who was always the one who protected others. That afternoon, Joyce came to my house with a shopping bag as a disguise. He brought the address written down on a piece of paper and explained the plan to me. I would go with her, discreetly, when Christopher went out to market. And so it was. I got into her car through the back garage, lowered on the seat, and we went to the lawyer's office. The building was simple. In downtown Grand Rapids. Blue sign. Sheila Brooks, Elder Law and Rights. When I entered, I felt butterflies in my stomach. The girl at the reception smiled and said, You can sit down. No, Tom. Mrs. Marilyn, the doctor is coming. When Sheila appeared, I almost couldn't speak. She was a black woman, with a firm voice. Look. He offered me a glass of water and said only, tell me your way. In his time, Mom. And I counted, Mom. I told him about when he came back, when he started to take me out of the places in the house, the cameras, the lock, the week I was without food, without a phone. I told him about the recordings, the notes, the phrases he said, as if talking about a piece of furniture that needs to be changed. I counted without raising my voice once. When I finished, she was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, How? You still have your house. And the truth. That's more than they realize. It was these words that gave me my first breath of courage after so long suffocated. But they're my family, the old Jordan. I said, my throat clenched. She looked at me firmly and replied, A family that holds you and uses you is not a family. It's abuse. At that moment, I realized that something had changed. I, who have always been floor, ceiling, and food would now be a wall that does not move. I returned home in silence, with dry eyes, but my heart alight. Joyce held my hand on the steering wheel and said, "Wow, now we're going to do it the right way." And slowly, and that's what I did. In the following days, I started to listen more. Each conversation of theirs was a puzzle piece. Christopher talked to brokers. Heather took pictures of the house, measured walls, everything being planned behind my back. But little did they know that every word spoken was being recorded. The lawyer advised me not to confront her. Don't give a sign that you know. No, Kakshu. Their power is in their reaction. Take it away from them. Then I smiled. He served coffee. Munkau. I see what I watched now, pretending not to notice the intentions behind each gesture. They thought I was still the same woman who trembled at a scream. But fear, when it matures, becomes wisdom. Lie. I'm Damascus Octown. One of those afternoons, while Heather was talking about changing the painting in the room, I looked at the old wall, the one where the portrait of my wedding was. She said, "Why then, when they're done, we can take that away too. It gives it a lighter look." I replied calmly, "You can take it off, honey. But remember, some brands don't even come off with paint." She didn't understand. Oh, Christopher laughed, and I thought, when I saw, laugh, my son, because when laughter is easy, the fall is usually hard. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because what still comes next? It's what changed me forever. That night, the sound of a conversation in the hallway made me stand up. I heard Christopher saying, "She has a young motown. Just push it nicely." And I thought, nay, tomorrow, yes, tomorrow you will see what a silent woman is capable of doing when silence is no longer fear, and it becomes a weapon. After that night, everything inside me changed. The pain was still there, but now it had purpose. I started to observe every detail with new eyes, as if finally understanding the game. The hidden phone became my shield. Why, I still thought that you. With every word Christopher uttered, with every poisonous phrase from Heather, I pressed the record button. Silently, the sound of their voice turned into proof, the kind of proof that time does not erase. The lawyer, I'd see one. Apparent Sarah did come on. Sheila, I always called me at the same time, by video call, and said, I'll stay calm. Near to Marilyn, the most important thing now is to register. So I recorded everything. I took pictures of the locks changed, the windows jammed, the kitchen drawer where they hid the door control. Joyce, with her serene courage, photographed the deliveries of the market in Christopher's name. He ordered purchases using my card. I don't know just a 6-step watch talking on. But the invoice went to his name. Each click was a wound becoming evidence. One day, I discovered the worst. Sheila asked me to review the retirement statements, and there it was, a transfer of $2,300 to a joint account in the name of Christopher L. Taylor and Heather L. Taylor. How? I felt the floor disappear. Now, everything I had built with decades of work, every morning turning into a pot in the public school, going to work with back pain, now it was theirs. I took my cell phone and took a picture of the statement, with the date, the account number, everything. I sent it to Sheila. She replied, and, oh, my macabre, I just stay here. All night said you nibble down. Perfect. This is misappropriation. Keep going. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the living room, with the lamp on, watching the dim light touch the walls. I heard Christopher mumbling in the bedroom. She said in your one down, toppest, getting slow. Heather, Anne. He barely understands what he signs. The anger rose, but I breathed. Their fear was that I was still lucid, and I was, more than ever. On the unwind citium, our body calm. Joyce was still firm with me. Why untapped? Every afternoon, she would walk past the fence and leave small paper notes inside an empty bottle of juice. Stand firm. Don't trust their silence. Sheila is ready. It was like receiving prayers in the form of a message. I kept them all in a little box, but what really sustained me was to see the lies turning into recorded truths. The voices that had once humiliated me were now trapped inside the device, powerless, cold, in, and it was there that I realized one thing. What they used to silence me would be exactly what I would use to free myself. One morning, Christopher arrived, excited. He threw a stack of papers on the table and said, "How? Mom, sign this right away. It's for the house insurance. You don't understand these things." I took the pen, pretended to read, and surreptitiously pressed the phone's record button. I asked, "Why do you have your name here too?" "Son? No," he replied too quickly. "Wow. How? Because I'm solving everything now. How? You don't have to worry. I recorded everything, every word. Heather, in the background, Leo, added, oh, yourself. It's for her sake. Elderly people need someone to take care of. Well, that phrase, the elderly need someone to take care of, burned me inside. It was as if she had spat on my story. I looked at her and thought, so, Dandy, you will see what an elderly woman taking care of her own destiny is. You know, I learned that sometimes our silence is the biggest noise the guilty can hear. And it was there that I promised myself that there would be no screaming. It only proves it. One day, so, as the sun was setting, I sat in the backyard with a cup of cold coffee and thought about everything that was yet to come. Sheila's voice echoed in my head. Under you. Don't rush the end. I knew they scenario. Marilyn, William. Justice likes those who wait at the right time. So I waited. And the other calm. And that's why I say, if you're watching this far, stay with me until the end. Because what's next? It is the moment when a woman who has been treated as nothing shows the value she has always had. That same week, Sheila asked me to personally deliver the evidence in a sealed envelope. Joyce drove me away, and I delivered the package with the recordings, the photos, the statements, and notes. As we left the office, she looked at me with a tired smile and said, "Well, now history's in the right hands." But fate still wanted to test me once more. That night, when I returned home, I saw something strange. Christopher and Heather were sitting in the living room, serious, with a briefcase on the table. "Why, what am I?" He looked at me and said, "We need to talk." And I, with my heart pounding, thought, there, have they discovered everything? Or is the tables about to turn? Christopher was sitting in living room, fiddling well. When was you talking out with the papers? When I arrived, the air was heavy, as if the house felt what was coming. Heather, now clean. Next to him, now, with that smile of someone who knows more than she says. "Mom, we need to review some documents from the house. Insurance and tax things. It's just a signature. No big deal." He said, "Yeah, well, so it did it to Nacho." I see. Sliding a folder in my direction. Why? I looked at the cover, but I didn't open it. I smelled the smell of new paper mixed with Heather's expensive perfume and thought, this is where the lie lives. They expected me to sign without reading. As usual, smile, needed cow, sound, watching trial. Of course, son, but let me see it calmly. Okay, my eyes are no longer the same. I took the briefcase calmly, and he seemed satisfied. Notice I counted one. They didn't realize that. Inside, Liam, I was already seeing the walls crumble. I waited for night to fall. When the noise of their shower echoed in the hallway, I slowly climbed the stairs to the attic. I hadn't been there in a while. The smell of dust mixed with old wood reminded me of Earl. He was the one who built that space. I kept so much there. Photos, notebooks, Christopher's toys, the box of my wedding dress. I turned on the dim light and started looking for the envelope that was always in a blue box, next to the house's documents. When I found it, I felt something different. The envelope was open, and the paper inside. It was not the same. I took it off carefully. It was a printed copy of my Old Testament, but something bothered me right away. The letters were darker. The paper was too new. I read slowly. It read, "I declare that the house situated on Maple Grove Street is wholly owned by Christopher L. Taylor. By the express will of the mother." My name was just below, with a perfect signature. Too perfect. It was mine, but it wasn't. My hand froze. The air was trapped in his chest. I sat on the floor, holding that paper as if it were a living snake. They had forged my signature. And at that moment, I understood the whole plan. First, to weaken myself. Then, it is your cow. Isolate myself a while. And finally, erasing myself as if I were just a memory that took up space. I stood there, unable to cry. Sometimes the betrayal is so deep that not even tears can come out. I took the envelope and stuffed it back into the blue box, just the way it was. Then I took pictures with my phone. I sent it to Sheila, along with a short message. I found what you were looking for. She replied within minutes. This is a federal crime. Marilyn? Now they have crossed the line. Keep everything in storage. I'll take care of the rest. I came down from the attic in silence. The house seemed to be watching me. Complicit. I ran my finger over the railing and remembered the first time we went up there. Earl and I, with little Christopher running down the stairs. One day this will be all yours. Son, he said. Mine. And it was. But not like that. I sat in the armchair and closed my eyes. The memory went through me like cold wind. I remembered the boy who drew colorful houses and wrote for Mommy at the bottom. Now that same boy was planning to tear me out of the home I had built. I thought about how powerful some memories are and how they get stuck inside us. Even when everything changes, they don't ask permission to come back. They just come back. And it made me want to ask whoever is listening to me now, do you also have a memory that has never left you? Even after years, share in the comments. I want to read it. Sometimes, sharing what hurts is the only way to stay standing. I took the envelope again, more calmly this time. The paper trembled in my hands, but my voice inside me now was firm. I wasn't going to let them win. Not now. The next morning, Christopher came up to me with that forced tone of kindness. Hey, Mom, Nanya, you, very calm. Did you see the papers? I looked at him and said, wow. Yes, I did. Son, shame now. But I'm still deciding whether to sign it. He smiled, no, but his eyes betrayed the discomfort. You can trust us. And I replied, looking firmly, oh, trust is something that is lost only once. He left the room, stomping his foot. From then on, I knew the tables had turned. They wanted to erase me from history, but I was going to write the ending with my own hands. And that same night, before going to sleep, Sheila called me in a low but determined voice. Marilyn, we need to act soon. And when I say it, you're going to be ready to tear down everything they've built on top of your pain. I hung up the phone, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, because what would come next? It would no longer be survival. It would be justice. But what I didn't imagine, it's just that. Before the sun came up, I would still see my son's real face, and he wouldn't be what I remembered. The morning started with a different smell of coffee. Not mine, theirs. Heather was in the kitchen, with her hair up and that expensive apron she liked to wear to look like a housewife. Christopher, sitting at the table, fiddled with his cell phone with a frown. When I entered, I felt the air dense, heavy, as if something was already being planned before I even woke up. Mom, can we talk for a minute? He asked, without looking up. I stood by the sink, holding the cup. Lady Sam, and in here once, okay? And just nodded. I. He took a deep breath and said, Oh, you've been going out a lot these days. Where has it gone? I looked at him and answered in the simplest and truest way possible. I've solved some pending issues. The word seemed to poke something in him. Ryan, how? He sat back in his chair. Suspicious. Pending issues? He repeated. Oh, trying to maintain control. Yes? Oh? No. I replied. Things in my life. Down. In my house. Dear. Heather interrupted. No. With that impatient tone of someone who thinks everything needs to revolve around her. Marilyn, we need transparency. We're taking care of everything here. And it would be nice to know what you're up to. We don't want surprises. Smile. Now, dear, I should have so close to you to down. Me neither. Honey. Christopher got up and came to me. We want the best for you. Mom. That's all. Of course, I replied. No caso pasó. I'm with him down, looking him straight in the eye. I want the best for myself. Too. He walked away, annoyed. Heather quickly changed the subject, but I already knew what was coming next. She opened a red folder and pulled out a new document. It's just a formality, he said. Oh, pushing the paper across the table. An early sale agreement for the house. If an emergency happens, everything is already solved. You know? Less bureaucracy for everyone. I took the paper calmly. Was the lyrics seemed to dance in front of me. Oh, but I saw every detail. The pre-printed signature. Wow. The name of the corrector. The blank field waiting for my pen. I looked at them and smiled. How? A smile that didn't come from kindness, but from certainty. Can I read it calmly later? I asked. Heather frowned. Oh, my. Trying to hide her irritation. Sure. No problem, he replied. No, forcing a sweet tone. Thank you, I said, folding the paper slowly and placing it on the counter. Think about it. The sentence sounded like a stone falling to the ground. Christopher was silent. Heather turned her back and started washing the cup too hard. Think. Oh, but don't delay, she said. They left soon after. The noise of the door slamming echoed through the house like a breath of freedom. I stood there in the kitchen, looking at the paper on the counter. I picked up the phone with an arm, activated the camera, and recorded a short video, silently for a few seconds before speaking. My voice came out firm, without trembling. Wow. They think I'm still the woman who cries alone. I should have changed to a deal. I'd come out right. But today, I listen, and I hope. I sent the video to Sheila, the lawyer, in less than a minute. She responded with a short message, but one that gave me goosebumps. The time has come. The unit company is so. Marilyn? We will file the injunction. I felt the ground firm up under my feet. It was as if, after so long, I finally had weight in the world again. I spent the rest of the day in silence. I made coffee, washed the dishes, swept the yard. Everything as usual, but nothing like before. Every gesture was calculated. Every step a choice. I was no longer the mother trying to please. It was the woman preparing the cleanest blow I have ever given in my life. The truth. At night, I sat on the couch and watched the house. The same house they wanted to snatch from me. I touched the wall. They were my dogs there. The small ornaments that kept stories that they would never understand. I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing I built, had been in vain. Heather walked down the hallway, talking loudly on the phone to someone. Yes, she will sign. Of course she will. Everything is under control. Little did she know how wrong she was. I closed my eyes and heard Sheila's voice in my mind, repeating, "How in that night song?" When a woman who has been injured learns to wait, no one holds back what comes next. I was no longer the victim. He was the witness of everything. And now, the author of the end, Lucille Tricerachum. But fate has a curious way of testing our strength. That same week, before I could act, something unexpected happened. Something that was not in the plans, neither in mine, nor in Sheila's. And what showed up on my door, he was not an enemy. It was a visit that would bring to light a secret that even I had forgotten. And then I realized justice was coming, but it never comes alone. The next day began with a different silence. It wasn't that heavy, fearful silence. It was the kind of silence that precedes change. I was in the kitchen when I heard the sound of a car parking in front of the house. I looked out the window and saw a police car. 2 officers got off, accompanied by a woman in a suit. Sheila, my heart raced. She looked at me from the sidewalk, and her simple wave told me everything. It was time. They knocked on the door. Heather, who was in the room, rushed to answer, puffing impatiently. Right? He asked, in that arrogant tone. The police officer showed the document. Miss Heather Taylor, this is a court order. The couple needs to leave the residence immediately. The case is under investigation. Heather laughed, a nervous, high-pitched laugh. No, this is absurd. This woman is senile. She doesn't know what she's doing. Sit down, he shouted, pointing at me. Christopher came downstairs with a pale face. What is this? Mom, what is this story? He asked, trying to appear calm. Nice. Sheila approached. Without changing her tone, the judge determined the temporary removal until the expert analyzes the documents and recordings. There are indications of financial and psychological abuse. He was speechless. For a moment, the boy I raised appeared there, lost, confused. But it was only an instant. Soon, the cold man returned. You're ruining your family. Mom, Pauline, you'll end up alone, she said, her voice breaking. And that's when I realized that I was no longer afraid. Fear had gone out, the same door he was about to walk through. I've been alone. Nay, wow. Christopher, I replied. Looking steadily, and I prefer that than to live locked up by those I generated. Heather tried to argue, screamed that she was going to sue, that I was being manipulated. The policeman just repeated, "Ma'am, take your things. Now, now." The next few minutes seemed eternal. They went up and down the stairs, filling suitcases in a hurry. Heather cried out of anger, not regret. Christopher tried to look at me, but I didn't reciprocate. There was nothing more to say. When they left, the noise of the door slamming echoed throughout the house. I stood in the middle of the room, staring into the void. The policeman approached and asked if I wanted someone to stay there with me. I smiled. No, thank you. I've been too stuck. Now I just want to stay. They left. Sheila hugged me quickly, as if knowing that words don't fit in the moment. You did it, Marilyn. The worst is over. I shook my head. The worst? Yes, but the end has not yet. She looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. Don't do anything alone. Let me take care of the rest. I promised, even though I knew there were things only I could do. When I was alone, I looked at the door. Now, for the first time in months, I was the one holding the key. I put it in the lock, turned it slowly. And the metallic sound of the latch echoed like music. A simple sound there, but one that made me tremble. I sat on the couch, the same sofa that was previously forbidden to me. I ran my hand over the fabric, smelled the smell of dust and memories. The house seemed to breathe again. I closed my eyes and prayed. I didn't ask for anything. I just thanked him. I thanked her for being alive, for having resisted. For still having the strength to own myself. That afternoon, I opened all the windows. I let the wind in. The fresh air mixed with the smell of eucalyptus brought back a piece of my soul that I thought was lost. I walked through the rooms slowly, as if revisiting an old love. I touched the walls, the furniture, the picture frames. Every corner of the house had a piece of my history, and now, finally, it was mine again. When night fell, I made some tea, sat on the porch and watched the lights of the neighborhood turn on one by one. Joyce appeared on the other side of the fence, smiling. Finally, I smiled back. Finally, I saw. But as the sky darkened, a thought crossed me like a shadow. Justice had begun. Yes, but repentance had not yet arrived. And I knew, deep down, that Christopher wouldn't accept losing so easily. He was my son, and I knew well the pride I had planted. That night was the first in a long time that I slept peacefully. But before I closed my eyes, I felt a shiver because something inside me said that the silence that would follow, it would not be rest. And I was right, because the next day the doorbell rang, and whoever was on the other side of the door would bring the beginning of the most unexpected part of my life. Revenge. Oh, the next day, the doorbell rang. I expected it to be the postman, or maybe Joyce bringing fresh bread. But when I opened the curtain, I saw a girl with a camera hanging around her neck. Mrs. How much is Marilyn Taylor? No, she asked. No, and Sarah politely. From Grand Rapids Journal. We received a complaint of falsification of documents involving a property on this street. Would you like to comment? I stood still, my heart racing. The story had already reached the press. I didn't have to say anything. Sheila had already prepared me for this. No statements for now, I replied. Oh, and closed the curtains slowly. Wow. That afternoon, the phone rang 3 times. I didn't answer any. The first call was from a private number, the second from Heather's number, and the third, this one made me sit down, from Christopher himself. The device rang, and with each touch, I heard the echo of everything he said to me. You're going to rot here, as if the words were still trapped inside the house. Shortly after, Nilston, one of the chocodies, the old town, was, is anyone wait for you? Joyce came running to the balcony. There you call them, never wide, cell phone in hand. Did you see what he posted? Marilyn? I took my glasses, took a deep breath and read. What? Sad to see a mother being manipulated by jealous neighbors and greedy lawyers. All I did was try to take care of her. Now they want to paint me as a monster. My blood ran cold, but not from anger. Too bad. Too bad to see how far a son's lie could go to try to cover up his own guilt. Heather, will yours, next to her, called everyone, cousins, distant aunts, co-workers, telling them that I was getting confused, that I needed psychological help. But what they didn't know is that Sheila already had everything documented. The recordings, the photos, the bank statements, the forgery of the signature. Everything was safe. The process ran in secrecy, away from social networks, away from the screams. And it was precisely the silence of the truth that began to make noise. 2 days later, the journal ran the headline, Wow. Son of elderly woman in Grand Rapids, investigated for forgery and financial abuse. Sheila's phone kept ringing. She called me smiling. Truth likes light. Marilyn, near how? I'm dear wish. Now we just have to wait. But waiting has never been harder. Christopher began to send long messages, full of drama. I'm sad to got to kiss out. My dear, Mom, forgive me. I messed up, but it was to help. No, Heather is not to blame for anything. Let's talk, please. I read them all, but I didn't answer any. I had Joyce deliver a single, handwritten sentence in a short note. Whatever you have to say, tell the judge. Joyce looked at me with teary eyes as she took the message. Are you sure? He asked. I do. I replied. Because he needs to learn that forgiveness comes after the truth, not before. The following days were strange. The whole neighborhood was talking. Some whispered on the sidewalk. Others came to greet me as if apologizing for having believed them before. I went out little, but when I did, I walked upright, with the same step I had when I was young, and went to school to work. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So, if you're listening to me right now, like this video and subscribe. Let's make this story reach those who need to remember that silence is also a way to win. Christopher, on the other hand, then why now is your standard was crumbling. No. I watched from afar as the delivery truck of the company he worked for came to collect the uniforms. He was fired. Now, Heather disappeared from the networks, and the friends began to move away. Lies lose strength when the truth begins to appear in the newspapers. On a cold night, I received an envelope under the door. It was a letter from him. The letters trembled. I made a mistake. Mom, I just wanted to put you at ease. I swear I didn't know it was going to get to this point. Let me explain. I held the paper for long minutes. The maternal instinct pulled me to one side. The survival instinct to the other. In the end, I left the envelope on the table and went to make tea. A mother's pain does not go away, but neither does it have to govern what comes after. Sheila called me the next day. He filed a request for a conciliatory hearing. Marilyn, I'm so talking. He wants to talk before the trial. I was silent for a few seconds. No, I replied. I want him to listen to me. I want you to listen before the law. She agreed. It will be in a few days, and it'll be by your side. No. When I hung up, Matthew, I looked out the window. The sky was leaden, and the trees swayed as if the wind whispered, "It's over." But I knew it wasn't over yet, because as much as justice has come, the wound of a betrayal never closes the same way. And as I watched the empty yard, Nisio coxalt me under, a thought flashed through me like a knife. He was still going to try one last time. I knew that look, that tone, that fear disguised as regret. And when he came back, I would need to be ready, not to defend myself, but to say what he never wanted to hear. Because sometimes forgiveness is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the truth. The Kent County Courthouse was cold, with that kind of silence that makes you listen to your own heart. I arrived early, accompanied by Sheila and Joyce, who insisted on going with me just to hold my bag. But I knew she wanted to hold my hand, if I needed to. I wore the same blue dress that I had kept for so many years, which Earl said made me look strong, and around my neck, the necklace he gave me when I turned 40. I touched him a few times, as if asking for courage from those who have already left. Christopher was there, now, across the room, dressed in a dark suit. He looked smaller than I remembered. Oh my. Heather sat next to her, restless, fidgeting with her nails and avoiding my gaze. When he saw me enter, he lowered his head. How? For the first time, he was the one who couldn't face me. The judge arrived and everyone stood up. The hearing began with the formal reading of the case. Case number 154322. State of Michigan for fifth. Christopher L. Taylor, Pell, charged with misrepresentation, financial abuse, and false imprisonment. Well, hearing those words was like reliving everything, but this time without fear, because now the truth spoke for me. Sheila was the first to speak in a calm voice, without theatricality. She presented the evidence. Your Excellency, Mom, Mrs. Town, Marilyn Taylor, 66, was held in prison within her own home, had part her pension diverted to a joint account created without consent, and was the target of forged signatures on a document of transfer of ownership. What? Ow! The judge's eyes narrowed. Why, did you bring the original documents? Yes, Sheila replied. Oh, handing over the envelope. Well, as he examined, the audios began to play in the room. It was Christopher's voice, harsh, impatient, low, saying, Mundana Maya Bees, Has Chum Talk. You're old, Mom, and old needs rest. Another excerpt came soon after. She's going to sign it. She trusts. He always trusted. No one moved. Not even Heather. The sound echoed through the walls of the courtroom, like an open wound. Christopher tried to interrupt. This was taken out of context. I would never lock my mother up. I just wanted to help. But Sheila cut him off elegantly. Then why was the door of the house locked from the outside? Mr. Taylor? And why was her phone removed from the room? Why was the refrigerator empty? He was left without an answer. The judge asked for silence. And then came the final blow, the false will. Sheila showed it off on the big screen. This is the copy presented by the defense as a valid document. However, the technical expertise found that the signature was scanned from an old form, dated 2012, and Heather turned pale. I didn't know anything. He shouted, Well, I'm never sick child yet. It was him. He did it all by himself. Christopher stood up. And then I hung, furious. Don't put me in the middle of this. The judge hit the gavel. Order! Sheila just took a deep breath and concluded. Your Excellency, my client doesn't want revenge. She wants justice. And she wants back what has always been hers, the right to live in peace, in her own home. I felt the tears come, but I held on. That moment was not one of crying. It was one of delivery. The judge analyzed the documents for long minutes. The clock on the wall didn't seem to move. Finally, he looked up and said, Pan Wunsudo. This court declares null and void any document produced or signed by the victim in the last 6 months. I also order the opening of a criminal investigation against Christopher L. Taylor for misrepresentation, how, financial abuse, and false imprisonment. Mrs. Howe, Marilyn Taylor will be restored to all her rights to the property and property. The sound of the hammer banging echoed like the sound of a door opening, the same one that once imprisoned me. Christopher collapsed in his chair. Heather ran out of the room, crying and cursing. I stood still, taking a deep breath, with my hands clasped in my lap. Sheila looked at me and asked softly, "Do you want to say something?" I shook my head. No. He has already been told what he needed. The referee made a gesture of respect. Mrs. Taylor, I don't know what you went through, but the state is deeply sorry. I smiled slightly. No, thank you, Your Honor, but time is in charge of teaching. What is lost in a child? What is lost in a child is sometimes found again in faith. While everyone was leaving, I remained seated for a moment. I touched the necklace around my neck and thought of Earl, Joyce, Sheila, and all the women who have ever been locked inside themselves and yet have found a way out. And if you've come this far with me, I want you to know the strongest moment hasn't been this yet. The strongest is what comes later, when justice is fulfilled on the outside, but needs to be resolved on the inside. And I walked out of the courtroom slowly, with my head held high. Outside, the press was waiting, cameras and microphones pointed. I walked past them in silence, the cold wind whipping down on my face. Joyce was waiting for me in the car. Marilyn said, with a smile and teary eyes, "It's over." Nay, Marilyn. I went in, closed the door, and replied, "Man, I say there, how to watch the hill tree. I want to scene. No, my friend, now it's going to start, because as much as the justice of the law had been done, the justice of the heart still had one last account to settle, and that would be the most difficult of all. The months that came after the hearing were a time of calm and silence, but not that heavy silence of before. It was the kind of silence that is born when the wind finally stops after a storm. I went back to taking care of the house, the plants, my mornings with hot coffee and newspaper, and Joyce came almost every day, and we laughed at a little of them, like two girls who survived the same war. The city was still talking about the case. Of course, the neighbors, who had previously looked away, now stopped to greet me. Some distant relatives started calling. We didn't know everything. Marilyn, they said. Long. I always answered with the same phrase. Now, you know, Christopher, me, by court order, could not approach me. He was forbidden to come within 200 meters of the house. And yet, from time to time, I saw his figure on the other side of the street, standing still, as if he didn't know if he was coming or going. The police told me not to react, and I obeyed. But inside me, there was no hatred. There was a kind of cold compassion. the kind that is born when we understand that those who destroy others are already destroying themselves. Heather was the first to disappear. It is said that he left Christopher shortly after the hearing. I don't want to mix with scandal. They said, no. She took the car, the suitcases, and disappeared. His phone, locked by the court, no longer rang. The friends moved away. The new job he had gotten was short-lived. The company didn't want to keep someone involved in criminal proceedings. The bank froze the accounts until the end of the investigation. The boy who once dreamed of taking care of his mother could now barely take care of himself. Sheila called me from time to time to update the process. Everything is going well. Marilyn, the final decision will be made soon. It will be exemplary. I thanked him, and we talked about everything, except the pain, because pain, now, when it becomes a lesson, no longer needs so many names. One day, I received an unexpected call from a distant cousin. Was there none about you? Ruth, Alon, Marilyn, Anistel. I saw your story in the newspaper. We judged it wrong. Forgive me. I took a deep breath and replied, forgiveness is already underway. Ruth, it just hasn't finished arriving yet. That same week, Joyce showed up at my door with a bouquet of lilies. This is for you, he said. I smiled. Huh? Surprised. But she shook her head and explained, it's not mine. It arrived at my house. But the card was for you. I took the white envelope and read, in the shaky handwriting I'd known since I was a boy. Thank you for not letting me die quietly. The small print, the uncertain strokes, it was his. Christopher and Odile. I stood still for a moment, with my heart suspended. Joyce asked if I wanted to throw it away. I shook my head. Niece, no. This is a kind of regret, and regret is not thrown away. We hang it on the wall of memory. I took a magnet and put the card on the fridge, right next to the old photo of him as a child on the first day of school. After that, notes started to appear at my door, small, almost hidden. One said, "One, I miss the smell of your coffee." Another, "Nay, if I could go back in time." And one last, the simplest of all, "Mom, forgive me." I read them all. Found. I burned some. I kept others. But I didn't answer any. Because sometimes forgiveness needs the weight of silence to teach. There was no revenge in what I felt, just calm, complete justice. The world, none, little by little, showed Christopher what he taught me in the worst possible way. That those who arrest one day find themselves trapped in their own loneliness. The neighborhood began to see me as an example. A lady in the market said to me, "You had courage, Mrs. Marilyn. I wouldn't have." I smiled. I smiled. We only know the size of the force when it is the only thing left. And it was true. Life tested me to the limit, but it also showed me what it is to be reborn after a fall. At the end of an afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked up at the orange sky. I thought of Earl, of everything he would say if he were there. You did the right thing, Mary. Justice never arrives late. It only comes at the pace of deserving. And that's when I felt something different, a peace that didn't hurt, that just filled. But even in the calm, that she was the guy. Life likes to surprise. The following week, Joyce came to visit me with a strange expression. There's something you need to see, he said, handing over the newspaper. On the cover, a photo of Christopher being taken away by federal agents. The headline read, "Man accused of forgery is sentenced to house arrest and ordered to reimburse embezzled amounts." I read it in silence. I didn't cry. I just closed the paper and said, "Then it's over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet, because that same night, when the moon was already illuminating the yard, I heard light footsteps on the porch and the sound of an envelope sliding under the door. Inside, a ticket and a key. The note said, "That's the key to the basement. Now, I left something there that you need to see." Christopher, I didn't. What should he hound? I shouted. My heart tightened. No. I stood there, looking at that key, not knowing if what was waiting for me down there was a memory or a late request for forgiveness, and maybe was something much deeper than that. It took me a few minutes to decide what to do with that key. I looked at her on the table, the cold metal, reflecting the light from the kitchen. It was the same key to the basement, the same one that once locked me inside. And now, ironically, it came from the hands of those who arrested me. I picked it up carefully, like someone touching a ghost. Now, I went down the stairs with a heavy heart, but not out of fear, of remembrance. That smell of old wood, the same sound of my footsteps. Everything seemed the same, but I knew it was no longer the same woman who came down there. In the corner, not one, a cardboard box with my name written in thick pen. Inside, I found a brown envelope and a blue-bound notebook. The envelope contained a short note, written in trembling handwriting. Why, was still, I never knew how to be the son you deserved, but I tried to be the man who learned from the mistake. Forgive me. No. Mom. I opened the notebook. They were his notes, dates, confessions, childhood memories. The first time I saw the mother cry was when the father died. The second was because of me. I read it all quietly, Mom, and realized that this was no longer the Christopher who locked me in. It was the boy trying to get back inside the house he destroyed. I put the notebook away, without anger, without tears. Some guilt does not ask for an answer. They ask for peace. In the days that followed, and the days that followed, I went back to taking care of the life I had left, and it was a good life. I made a garden in the backyard, planted tomatoes, lavender, and a mint plant that Joyce brought me. I collected the old paintings from the garage and repainted the frames. I put new paint on the room, a light cream color, to let the light in. Wishiranadirham. Ha. For the first time in a long time, I left the windows open. Then the sound of the street was good for me. Today, I walk through the rooms without fear. I sleep without locking the bedroom door. And when I wake up, I thank you. New, freedom. I learned is not the opposite of prison. It is the opposite of fear. Sometimes I sit on the porch and watch the sunset reflecting in the windows of neighboring houses. I see mothers calling their children to dinner. Husbands mowing lawns, dogs running wild. Oh, it's an ordinary world, but I know the value it has. Living in peace is the most expensive luxury in the world. Christopher has not yet appeared, and it may never appear, but every once in a while I hear the mail ringing, and I find a card with no sender. I hope you're doing well. Take care of the plants. Sorry, I said email. Hata. I read. Oh, breathe. Well, and keep it in the drawer. Not to collect regrets, but to remember that life has a strange way of giving back what we lose, sometimes in the form of silence. Today, when I look in the mirror, Harry, Mashawanda Sigsal, I see the marks of time, but I also see something else. I see firmness. The woman who once apologized for existing now says no calmly and without guilt. I learned that love is not limitless surrender. It's choice, and I chose to belong to myself. At night, I turn on the television, turn the sound down, and watch the clock on the wall. Each ticking reminds me that I am still here, alive, whole, owner of my story. And you know what's curious? The house is still the same. The walls, the furniture, the farm, even the smell of the hallway. But everything has changed because I have changed. I think a lot about what it is to be a mother. We are born with this strength to protect, to give in, to give. But if we don't protect ourselves too, we become prisoners of our own love. I loved it too much. And maybe that's why I didn't see the signs. God has a patient way of waking us up. And when I woke up, I found that he never abandoned me. I had forgotten myself. I don't wish Christopher harm. I pray for him. I pray that you will find the same forgiveness that I found. Not mine, but God's. Because the forgiveness that saves is the one we ask for ourselves. Now, when night falls and the wind passes lightly through the curtain, I close my eyes and thank you for having lived it all. Yes, everything, even the worst, because it was the worst that taught me the value of standing. But there is something I still need to do, something I left for later, because it requires more than courage. It requires farewell. And that's what I'm going to tell you about now. Because as much as the story seems to be over, there's one last door that I still need to open. And it is the one that will close everything that was left behind. You're going to rot here. It was these words that buried me alive for a while, but they were also the ones that made me reborn. Today, when I think about them, they no longer hurt. They sound like a distant echo, a memory that has lost its power. Christopher remains far away. I know you still live in the same city, but we follow different paths, each one living with their own silence. I heard that he started working at a community shelter, and I like to believe that he learned something from all of this. Maybe not about me, but about what love is when life demands respect. Heather never heard from me again, and I stopped waiting. Joyce remains my neighbor, my soul friend. From time to time, she brings hot bread and we talk about the weather, the flowers, and how much our hearts change when we learn to choose peace. The house remains the same, but it's different. The basement, my dear wanted cockloam, once dark, now has a finely tuned piano and flowers in the corner. Sometimes, at night, I sit there, put on an Ella Fitzgerald record, and let the sound fill what was previously empty. I close my eyes and think, wow, I was a mother. I was hurt. I was forgotten. But now, I'm soon, finally, more. I own myself. The great lesson of all this is that love, when it has no respect, turns into prison, and forgiveness, when it comes at the right time, is the key that opens the bars. I discovered that being strong is not never falling. It is to continue standing, even when the ground seems to have disappeared. I also learned that God does not abandon those who do not abandon their own conscience. Faith, sometimes, does not cry out. Just wait. And when the time comes, justice comes along, not with applause, but with peace. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me so far. There are stories that we tell so we don't forget, and there are others that we tell to heal. If this one touched you in any way, leave a like, because it's like a hug, and every hug is good for the soul. If you want to come back for another coffee and listen to me again, subscribe to the channel. You want to? Here. Each story is an invitation to take a deeper breath and believe that time always fixes what is true. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching. I want to know how far this story has managed to go and with whom it has found shelter. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.